For the first time tonight, we have confirmation that U.S. Marines are on the ground in Syria. Conventional troops with a specific mission as directed by the president. These are different from the Special Operations Forces that have already been active inside Syria. Let's get the latest on this breaking story from Pentagon reporter Lucas Tomlinson. He has the details. Good evening, Lucas.
Good evening, Brett. Well, that's right. U.S. Special Operations Forces have been on the ground in Syria for roughly a year. But just today, in a report confirmed by the Pentagon, first reported by the Washington Post, a detachment of U.S. Marines, along with their artillery, M777 artillery units, capable of firing artillery rounds about 20 miles to their targets. So that will bring these Marines very close to the Islamic State's de facto capital of Raqqa, Syria. Now, this increase in American posture in Syria comes just days after the U.S. military sent another group of U.S. Special Operations Forces to Manbij in northwest Syria. It's an increasingly crowded battlefield with Turkish-backed forces, Kurdish groups, Syrian regime troops, and Russian forces. The top U.S. commander in Iraq, which oversees the war against ISIS, said all these forces are within, quote, grenade range. Donald Trump just accepted a plan from the Pentagon, from Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, how to accelerate the mission against ISIS. Here's what Donald Trump said in his joint address to Congress a few days ago.
I directed the Department of Defense to develop a plan to demolish and destroy ISIS, a network of lawless savages that have slaughtered Muslims and Christians and men and women and children of all faiths and all beliefs. We will work with our allies, including our friends and allies in the Muslim world, to extinguish this vile enemy from our planet.
Now, up till now, President Trump has not revealed plans to defeat ISIS publicly. Tomorrow on Capitol Hill, the head of the U.S. military Central Command will be briefing Congress, the Senate Armed Services Committee. That's General Joe Votel. Expect questions from lawmakers about this ramped-up plan to defeat ISIS now that they're, for the first time, confirmed conventional U.S. forces on the ground in Syria to defeat ISIS, to go along with some other Army units that we have reported here at Special Report, the HIMARS, which fire rocket artillery into Raqqa, which will also be part of this battle, this ramp-up to defeat and crush and ultimately destroy ISIS, which is the president's stated goal. Brett?
Lucas Tomlinson live at the Pentagon. Lucas, thank you. More on this with the panel, and obviously the fight for Mosul inside Iraq, also an ISIS stronghold, continues as well with Iraqi forces and U.S. help. Now to a fight of a very different type here in Washington, and one that is shaping up to be a political battle of epic proportions. House Republicans are at war with each other tonight over the leadership's plan, depending on your perspective, to replace a faltering Obamacare with a better alternative, or just put a fresh coat of paint on a broken down structure that will remain in place. We have Fox team coverage. John Roberts is at the White House with what President Trump is doing to promote that new plan. We start off tonight with Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel. A very tension-packed Capitol Hill all day today. Good evening, Mike.
Well, good evening, Brett. Two House committees are working this hour getting a first crack at this GOP health care proposal. The Democrat strategy appears to be trying to delay it, hoping that will be enough to ultimately stop it.
I said to you that I would like to make a motion to postpone the markup for 30 days. I don't understand why that is not in order at this time.
I move to table the motion, if it really is a motion.
Do we have it? Where is it? Can your staff provide it for us?
Yes.
When did we receive it? Mr. Chairman, you were trying to rush this bill.
Some resistance from Democrats on the Republican effort to scrap and replace Obamacare.
You're afraid of sunshine. And we will insist that it be spotlighted, and the public is going to react, I assure you.
Let's not rewrite history here. You claim you had a CBO estimate. You did not. You had a letter. And it wasn't even based on the bill. It was based on specifications by a three-committee working group.
Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady tried to keep moving forward.
The most important thing for all Americans to know is that we will ensure our fiscally responsible legislation meets all the reconciliation instructions before it reaches the House floor.
Democrats took the opportunity to take swipes at the bill and even President Trump.
What this bill needs is some extreme vetting. We're being asked to vote without knowing how much it costs and without knowing what size it is.
The White House budget director predicted the Congressional Budget Office will weigh in soon.
The only question about the CBO, is it going to be really good or is it going to be great when that number finally comes out? I think it's going to be on Monday.
Although the White House press secretary notes CBO has been wrong on health care before.
If you're looking at the CBO for accuracy, you're looking in the wrong place. I mean, they were way off last time in every aspect of how they scored and projected Obamacare.
One criticism from some conservatives is the legislation doesn't fully repeal Obamacare.
If you just look at the bill text, the very first paragraph says it amends the Affordable Care Act. It doesn't repeal it. And so the American people want us to repeal it and replace it with something that is different.
Congressional sources say that isn't fair because full repeal is not allowed under reconciliation. House Speaker Paul Ryan continues trying to rally his Republican conference to support this package.
This is the covenant that we made with the American people when we ran on a repeal and replace plan in 2016. This is what our bill does.
After this morning's Republican conference meeting, a conservative said he didn't think the GOP plan would work.
We're dealing all with coverage and nothing with cost containment, price reduction, health care, right? So we're designing a system that is not going to lower costs, and that's the big deal.
A White House ally emphasized the stakes are incredibly high.
If the Republican conference doesn't pass this, our whole agenda goes down the tubes. We don't do tax reform. We have to get Obamacare repealed and replaced before we can begin tax reform.
Fox News has confirmed Republican Whip Steve Scalise asked GOP members in conference today if they're with the president in favor of this package or with House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi trying to push conservatives to get on board. Brett?
Thanks, Mike. Senior White House officials say, one, the health care bill is open for negotiation and could possibly be changed along the way to passage. And two, when the final bill is presented, the administration and the congressional leadership will make it a binary choice. Either you vote for it or you watch Obamacare collapse and insurance companies flee this year. So the question now is, does President Trump have any leverage on skeptical Republicans or even some Democrats to push the health care bill across the finish line? Senior officials say the president will make a number of trips to push the health care bill. The White House is not yet confirming a trip Saturday, but the Louisville Courier-Journal is reporting officials there are preparing for a presidential visit to Kentucky. Kentucky is, of course, home to Senator Rand Paul, one of the most vocal critics of the American Health Care Act as it stands today. Worth noting that candidate Donald Trump won 118 of Kentucky's 120 counties in November, 6 more counties than sitting Senator Rand Paul won in his re-election bid. That election math may play out with House members, too. For the Conservative Freedom Caucus, candidate Trump overwhelmingly won each member's district and their state as well. And Trump actually got more votes than several of the representatives in the caucus. Take a look at the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, Congressman Mark Meadows from North Carolina's 11th congressional district. President Trump won 16 of the 16 counties in that district, 76 of 100 counties in North Carolina, and he came just shy of the congressman's vote total in that district. But in Florida's 6th district, candidate Trump got more votes than Freedom Caucus Congressman Ron DeSantis, winning all 4 of the 4 counties in that district, 58 of 67 in Florida. And in West Virginia's 2nd district, candidate Trump got almost 20,000 more votes than Freedom Caucus Congressman Alex Mooney, overwhelmingly winning all 17 counties in that district in West Virginia. And it's not just the leverage on health care, but also on the Judge Gorsuch nomination to the Supreme Court. The pressure will be on these 11 Senate Democrats up for re-election in 2018 in states where candidate Donald Trump won more than 80% of the counties. Take a look at Missouri Democrat Senator Claire McCaskill. Candidate Trump won 111 out of 114 counties in the state she's running for re-election. In Montana, Democrat John Tester runs again in a state where candidate Trump won 50 out of 56 counties. West Virginia Democrat Senator Joe Manchin is running for re-election in a state where all 55 counties voted for the Republican Donald Trump. And finally, in Indiana, Democrat Joe Donnelly is running in a state where 88 of 92 Hoosier counties went to Donald Trump. There are 7 other states just like that, which is why outside groups supporting the Trump administration are already running issue ads in many of these 11 states. One of them came out today.
For decades, America's presidents have broken their promises. They've deceived us to push their political agenda.
If you like your doctor or health care plan, you can keep it.
Now, we finally have a president committed to keeping his promises.
Above all else, we will keep our promises to the American people.
Support the president and tell the liberals not to fight the Trump agenda.
President Trump is meeting with conservative Republican leaders about the health care bill at this hour at the White House, but it's a moderate Republican who's at the center of breaking news tonight. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us live from the North Lawn with details of a major diplomatic appointment. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. And the breaking news tonight, Fox News has learned that President Trump has tapped the former Utah governor and 2012 presidential candidate Jon Huntsman Jr. to be the new United States ambassador to Russia. Sources say President Trump called Huntsman, who was the ambassador to China in the Obama administration, ambassador to Singapore under Bush 41 a couple of days ago, to offer him the job, and Huntsman accepted. So now he'll just go through the vetting process, and then he'll be off to Moscow. As the president chooses his top man in Moscow to deal with Vladimir Putin, he is also putting the hard sell on his health care plan to skeptical Republican conservatives. The president engaged in some gentle arm twisting today, inviting to the White House leaders of some of the most prominent conservative groups opposed to the American Health Care Act.
The president is very proud of the product that we have produced. We are out in full sell mode all around the country talking about how we think this is the best way to solve the problem that the American people face.
Those groups have labeled the new Republican health care bill Obamacare Light, a warmed-over substitute for government-run health care, Ryan Care, and bad policy. The president's senior counselor today indicated there is at least some room for compromise.
The president has made clear, as has the vice president, Bill, this is the plan, but that the president has also used the word negotiation. There's also a process at play here. It's called reconciliation. And everyone knows as this American Health Care Act makes its way through the normal channels, it probably will be changed somewhat.
The president was also looking down the road to addressing the high cost of prescription drugs, meeting for the first time with Democratic Congressman Elijah Cummings, who in the past has had harsh words for the new president. On the drug issue, Cummings says the meeting went well.
He was enthusiastic, and he was clearly aware of the problem, and clearly he made it clear to us that he wanted to do something about it.
But Cummings had another message for the president about his dire descriptions of the African-American community.
Most African-American people are doing very good. And when we hear those words about carnage and we're living in depressed situations, I told him that it was very hurtful to people.
The president will also work to sell the health care plan to Senator Ted Cruz, inviting Cruz and his wife Heidi to the White House for dinner tonight. A year ago, Cruz was ripping the president for sending out a nasty tweet about Heidi.
I don't get angry often, but you mess with my wife, you mess with my kids, that'll do it every time. Donald, you're a sniveling coward, and leave Heidi the hell alone.
Press Secretary Sean Spicer is predicting a far different dialogue tonight.
They're looking forward to a great dinner. This is a president that's going to engage with everybody that can help join in proposing ideas and thoughts and opinions on how to move the country forward. So he looks forward to dinner tonight with Senator and Mrs. Cruz.
While the president works to sell the new health care plan, next week we'll get a better idea of what it will take to fulfill his plans to rebuild the military when his OMB director releases more detailed budget numbers.
The president wants to increase national defense and national security, law enforcement, pay for it with reductions elsewhere so that we don't add additionally to the deficit, and that's part of that ongoing conversation.
But conservatives are also skeptical of the upcoming budget blueprint, worried that the assumptions about revenue and spending and cuts just won't add up. And Mick Mulvaney on Tuesday, Brett, we're told by Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram, will host a bowling and pizza party here at the White House for members of the Freedom Caucus to sell them both on the budget and on the new health care plan. Brett?
Bowling always does it. John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thank you. President Trump is seeking to slash billions of dollars from the Coast Guard, the TSA, and FEMA to pay for his border wall and immigration crackdown. That's according to the Washington Post. The White House Budget Office proposal would pump up the budget for immigration and customs by about 36%, but it would come at the cost of several major programs for the agencies affected. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer would only say the administration is trying to move ahead with existing Homeland Security Department funds first and will release its full budget soon. FBI Director James Comey says he intends to serve out the remainder of his 10-year term. Comey told a cybersecurity conference in Boston today, quote, "You're stuck with me for another 6.5 years." Comey has, of course, been involved in a lot of political intrigue over the past year. Just this weekend, he asked the Justice Department to publicly reject an allegation from President Trump that his New York business phones were tapped under the orders from then-President Obama. And last year, Comey weighed in publicly twice on the Hillary Clinton email scandal that Clinton aides openly blame for her loss. There is more fallout tonight from the leaking of top-secret information about how the CIA supposedly monitors electronic devices to spy on people, supposedly just bad people. But the big question, of course, could that include all of us? Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has the latest tonight.
A U.S. government official tells Fox News that the FBI has launched a criminal investigation after WikiLeaks posted more than 8,000 documents allegedly from the CIA cyber unit. While the White House would neither confirm nor deny authenticity, spokesman Sean Spicer said there appears to be a double standard.
The interest and the outrage that occurred last year by a lot of Democrats when it came to leaks is interesting that we're hearing not as much outrage now when it comes to some of our issues of national security.
Among the revelations that Apple's iPhone was the target of so-called zero-day programs that exploit previously unknown weaknesses, allowing the CIA to capture audio and video recordings as well as extract user data and contacts. Apple said in a statement, quote, "While our initial analysis indicates that many of the issues leaked today were already patched in the latest iOS, we will continue work to rapidly address any identified vulnerabilities." Former intelligence officials and cybersecurity experts said the preliminary evidence points to an insider and the likelihood government contractors were involved with the support of a third party.
I can say that the ability to do this can be attributed to maybe 4 or 5 bad actors. Russia, China, perhaps a large organized criminal group, but this is a sophisticated actor.
Emphasizing cyber spying tools are not turned on U.S. citizens, former Director Michael Hayden defended the CIA on late-night television.
I can tell you that these tools would not be used against an American.
Why not? Why wouldn't they be used against an American? Americans are the ones who buy the Samsung TVs.
There are some bad people in the world who have Samsung TVs too. Right. And so NSA develops tools, CIA develops tools that we can use.
Now those secrets have apparently been spilled by WikiLeaks, the same group that posted former NSA contractor Edward Snowden's stolen records that exposed government surveillance. Russia recently extended Snowden's asylum.
2 of the most important eyes of the intelligence community have been degraded, and it means that we have to refocus and continue to rebuild and be able to understand what our adversaries are trying to hide from us.
A former intelligence official said some leaked documents are from last fall and not beyond, indicating the breach had stopped. Fox News has learned tonight that a CIA memo directs employees not to discuss the leaks or view the documents online. Brett.
Thank you, Catherine. Up next, the Army's storied 101st Airborne Division being asked to do more with less in an in-depth exclusive report from Fox News from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 9 in the Twin Cities, where the youngest son of the Virginia Democratic Senator and former vice presidential nominee Tim Kaine was arrested during an anti-Trump protest. 24-year-old Linwood Kane and 4 others are suspected of lighting a smoke bomb inside the Minnesota state capitol. Fox 12 in Portland as Oregon lawmakers consider a proposal to provide free postage for election ballots. It would cost about $650,000 a year. Oregon is one of 3 states that conduct elections entirely by mail. And this is a live look at Austin, Texas from our affiliate Fox 7. One of the big stories there tonight, state legislators are considering a transgender bathroom bill. The legislation cleared a first vote after 13 consecutive hours of public comment dominated by transgender rights supporters who opposed the measure. A Senate committee advanced the proposal that would require people to use public bathrooms that correspond with the sex on their birth certificates. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. Tonight, a Fox News exclusive. A storied military unit hurt by budget cuts, forced to do more with less, now having difficulty performing its mission. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin has this in-depth story tonight from Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
In 2003, at the start of the Iraq War, the U.S. military relied on the 101st Airborne Division to transport roughly 4,000 American troops deep into enemy territory in one night, landing in Mosul, forcing the Iraqi army to fight on 2 fronts. Years earlier, General Dwight Eisenhower relied on the Screaming Eagles to jump behind enemy lines on D-Day, giving them the element of surprise. But now, after 6 years of budget cuts, Army commanders say it would be difficult to carry out those operations today.
We used to have 2 aviation brigades here, over 200 aircraft, and now we're down to just 1 aviation brigade and slightly over 100 aircraft.
So if you had to move out tomorrow and do a brigade-level assault, could you do it?
We could not.
The strain was apparent when we visited Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home to the 101.
Our requirements haven't really reduced. So what you have is an inexperienced maintenance group that has to support a high tempo of flight hours, and it has a wear and tear on the force.
Colonel Craig Alia is the commander of the 101's remaining combat aviation brigade. He says the problems were compounded when President Obama imposed strict caps on troop numbers in Afghanistan.
When this combat aviation brigade deployed to Afghanistan in 2015, they had to leave their maintainers behind. The result, nearly 1,000 Army helicopter mechanics lost nearly a year of training.
Their skills atrophied, and some of the most senior experienced Apache mechanics left for other jobs.
Our maintainers left back here didn't have a fleet of aircraft to work on.
And the military had to spend $106 million to pay contractors in Afghanistan to do the job of these Fort Campbell mechanics.
Next to it here is a Hellfire.
Robert Hodgson is an Apache pilot. He says the decision to leave the maintainers at home has nearly doubled maintenance time.
It'll take anywhere from 30 to 45 days normally.
And how long is it taking now?
Here it's taken us almost 60 days just based on experience.
So twice as long.
And it is not just a shortage of experience. These World War II-era buildings, where the maintenance is done, are spread across Fort Campbell's 170,000 acres, leading to more inefficiency.
If we even look at the ceiling, you can see where the water damage is causing the wood itself to begin to dry rot out.
Former DoD Comptroller Robert Hale, who served the Obama administration, warned the military is exaggerating the readiness problem.
This is a time when the services, if you will, want to put their worst foot forward and make clear all the problems that are there. So I think we have to be a little skeptical.
The Army Vice Chief raised alarm bells when he testified that only 3 out of 58 Army combat brigades could deploy right now after 6 years of belt tightening.
When we say fight tonight, that means that unit needs no additional people, no additional training, and no additional equipment. And 3 is where we're at today.
Commanders strip what they need from other units to keep deploying.
When you reduce the overall size of the military and reduce the amount of brigades that you have to deploy, yet the demand on those goes up, you're going to have to deploy those more often. That induces stress.
The Army downsized by 40,000 soldiers 2 years ago. Now it wants 30,000 more troops. President Trump's budget will increase funding for the military by $54 billion. But some of this can't be solved by new recruits. Those troops still have to fix old equipment, and that takes time. At Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
We will continue to follow that. China is warning of what it calls a head-on collision involving the U.S., South Korea, and North Korea. It comes as the communist North continues its ballistic missile program, while the South and the U.S. engage in high-profile war games. Correspondent Rich Edson is following the action tonight from the State Department.
China is proposing a deal between North Korea and the United States. North Korea should suspend its nuclear and ballistic missile programs, and the U.S. should halt its annual ongoing military exercises with South Korea. The answer from the U.S. State Department?
This is apples and oranges. This is not, what we're doing in terms of our defense cooperation with South Korea is in no way comparable to the blatant disregard that North Korea has shown with respect to international law and international concerns repeatedly about its nuclear weapons program.
The State Department says North Korea must move first to suspend its aggressive activities. And this morning, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, summed up North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
We are not dealing with a rational person.
North Korea continues firing missiles into the South China Sea and advancing its nuclear weapons program. In response, the U.S. has deployed a missile defense system to South Korea. China sees that anti-missile system as a threat and wants to reduce regional tensions.
The two sides are like two accelerating trains coming toward each other, and neither side is willing to give way. The question is, are both sides really prepared for a head-on collision?
Next week, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will travel to Japan, South Korea, and China. The State Department says North Korea's weapons technology has reached a point where the U.S. and China need to examine responses beyond economic sanctions. And as official engagement with China intensifies in the young Trump administration, the Associated Press reports the Chinese government has granted preliminary approval for nearly 40 Trump trademarks to allow the Trump family business to develop ventures in hotels, insurance, and bodyguard and escort services. In response, Senator Ben Cardin, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, writes in a statement, quote, officials in Beijing have come to appreciate the potential return on investments for China in having a positive personal business relationship with the President of the United States, who has not taken appropriate and transparent steps to completely sever his relationship from the corporation that bears his name.
In response, the White House says the president has extracted himself from the Trump Organization and says he has no knowledge or input in these types of developments. Brett?
Rich Edson live at the State Department. Rich, thank you. ISIS terrorists dressed as doctors stormed a military hospital in Afghanistan today, killing and injuring dozens of people. Correspondent John Huddy has details from our Middle East newsroom.
The sound of gunfire crackled from the Sardar Daoud Khan military hospital in Kabul today. Afghan police and military forces stormed the building, trading fire with the ISIS militants disguised as doctors inside, who killed more than 30 people and wounded more than 50 others. This is purportedly a picture ISIS released of one of the 4 attackers. All were killed.
The fighting started on the first floor. We were trying to figure out what to do. Then 2 attackers dressed in white coats go to the 4th floor. 2 of my friends were killed, and I escaped through the windows.
ISIS has been in Afghanistan since 2014, but the Taliban is the dominant militant group in the country. It's been responsible for a series of recent attacks. Today's violence, though, underscores the security problems in a country where terror groups are able to carry out large-scale attacks, often targeting military and medical facilities. In fact, the UN estimates that some 3,400 civilians and more than 6,000 Afghan soldiers and police were killed last year alone in terror attacks in Afghanistan.
A hospital is a protected place in any law, any religion and any faith. An attack on a hospital is an attack on all Afghan people and all Afghan women.
The 400-bed military hospital where today's attack happened is very near the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. General John Nicholson, commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan, called today's attack a, quote, unspeakable crime, vowing to help destroy ISIS in Afghanistan. Brett?
John Huddy in our Middle East newsroom. John, thank you. The father of a slain U.S. military member who spoke out against President Donald Trump, candidate Donald Trump, back at the Democratic convention, says his travel is being restricted by the government. That's according to the Washington Post. It's a story that has gone viral recently. Khazir Khan, who is an American citizen, maintains he was forced to cancel a scheduled speech in Toronto because of those restrictions. But Khan is refusing to give details. The Canadian Foreign Ministry says it has nothing to do with this situation. The Post reports the U.S. government cannot prevent citizens with a passport from traveling if they have not been charged with a crime. Some American women are replacing work shoes with walking shoes today. Many refuse to show up to their jobs, instead taking part in protests designed to put an emphasis on their importance to society. But not everyone is going along with this program. Correspondent Julie Banderas shows us from New York.
It's International Women's Day, and around the world, women are making their voices heard, holding rallies on almost every continent, including several in the Mideast, calling attention to lower wages, sexual harassment, discrimination, and other issues women face every day.
In my opinion, women's rights are human rights, so anytime we're fighting for women's rights, we're also fighting for everyone's rights around the world as well.
This is what democracy looks like. In the U.S., women are being encouraged to take part in a Day Without a Woman, a massive nationwide strike being held from Boston to Los Angeles, as thousands of women speak out for equality to highlight the impact women have on the global and domestic economy. Today's rally is the fourth of 10 protests slated for the Trump administration's first 100 days, organized by the Women's March Group. Early this morning, President Trump weighing in on Twitter, writing, "I have tremendous respect for women and the many roles they serve that are vital to the fabric of our society and our economy." Meanwhile, as lawmakers urge a greater focus on women's issues on Capitol Hill, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi also chiming in at a rally in the nation's capital today.
When women succeed, the world succeeds. So here we are. A day without a woman. Just imagine what that would be if we could take it to its fullest extent.
But some women countered the protest by going to work today and shared their reasons for doing so with the hashtag #WeShowUp on Twitter, and say by not showing up to work, women aren't sending a unified message.
Having some teachers stay home and some other people stay home, we're not actually coming together on a cause that women can all fight for together. Yeah. And my concern is that we're not going to have a huge end result with today.
In all, 13 people were arrested here in New York City. Organizers say dozens of schools were also shut down across the country. Some critics would argue politics has no place in the classroom. Brett, back to you.
Julie Banderas, live in New York. Julie, thank you. Stocks were mixed today. The Dow was down 69. The S&P 500 lost 5. The Nasdaq was up 4. House Republicans have a plan to repeal and replace Obamacare, and now the battle is on. We will talk about it all with the panel when we come back.
You're going to repeal and replace Obamacare. And this is what you've come up with. This is a bad joke.
If people didn't like Obamacare, they're going to hate this.
A prescription for disaster.
As President Trump often says, bad, sad.
We're fulfilling these promises in a very transparent and thoughtful manner.
What may well be the most important bill that I will have worked on in my congressional career.
I applaud President Trump for working with us to bring forward a bill that's common sense, that lets patients be in charge of their health care decisions.
Well, the markup sounds and sights and sounds from those two committee hearings where the bill is actually being written and will likely be changed along the way as there is pushback, not only from Democrats, but as you heard from Republicans. Where are we on all of this? Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard. Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and Matt Schlapp, contributor with The Hill. Okay, Mara, the sound and fury of the pushback, but when push comes to shove at the end of this,
I think they're going to have the votes. That's what
Why do you say that?
I think they're going to have the votes. This is really important. They can't really do much of anything else without doing this. Also, Paul Ryan seems very, very confident, and he has a nice cushion in the House. He can afford to lose around 20 conservative Republicans if they don't want to vote for this.
21, I think.
That's a 21. And I think he can probably pull it off. What's interesting to me is to see if the president starts putting pressure on some of these conservative Republicans. He is going to Kentucky.
Well, we think so. They're not confirming that.
They're not confirming it, although the Louisville Courier-Journal thinks he's coming. But he's putting pressure on Rand Paul, big holdout in the Senate. And then to me, what's really going to be interesting is over time, the way this is crafted, the people whose health care costs are going to go up are people between 40 and 64, people who are too young for Medicare. And a lot of those people are Trump voters, especially in rural areas. The people whose costs will go down are younger millennials who won't have the mandate anymore, and they potentially will have cheaper health care because the ratio will be changed. You'll be allowed to charge older people more than you are now. So those are not Trump voters.
The pushback is from conservatives who say this is not fully being repealed and that it leaves an entitlement state in place. The leadership is saying it's in 3 phases. And it seemed like they had a hard time explaining it off the get-go, that there's this first part, then there's the regulatory part that Secretary Price does, then there's the other piece of legislation that deals with across state lines and other elements that are attractive to Republicans.
I think the conservatives are right in their criticism. And my colleague at the Washington Examiner, Philip Klein, who's an expert on this and has written more about this probably than anybody, wrote, "Liberals have won the central philosophical argument, and Republicans are reduced to fighting over the mechanics." That's the fight that we're watching take place right now. I think it's a problem for Republicans. I don't agree with Mara. I don't think that this bill as presented passes anything like it.
But there's an evolution of this bill.
There's an evolution of this bill, and something like it could pass, or something with major revisions could pass, because ultimately the question that I think leadership is going to pose to conservatives and others is, do you want to be for Obamacare or do you want to be for this?
Yeah, a binary choice.
The problem is, if you believe, as Philip Klein suggests, and as I believe, and as I think many of the conservatives believe, that this is basically Obamacare light, that this is, you're accepting the structures of Obamacare, you're accepting the philosophical underpinnings of Obamacare, that basically this is now a question of universal access, which is the way that you're hearing a lot of the proponents sell it, rather than a question about cost and freedom to choose and quality of care and health outcomes. What do you gain? And do Republicans want to own the politics of that in addition to the
that the tax credits are leveling the playing field, that it's a reverse of the subsidies, and that it is leveling the playing field on taxes, and then the marketplaces, then when you create in phase 3 the cross state lines and the tort reform and everything else, that creates the market by which costs go down.
I think that part of the argument is a reasonably compelling part of the argument, that these tax credits are no doubt better than the original subsidies, even if you're hearing from conservatives that they're effectively the same thing. I don't think they're necessarily the same thing, but that's one part of the argument. It's not the whole argument.
Matt. This is the fundamental political fact. They've got to rescind Obamacare, and they have to pass an alternative. I think the alternative will change greatly, and Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, when he gets over to the Senate, would be very smart to have a freewheeling amendment process, allow conservatives to feel like they're part of the creation of this bill. But nobody should be mistaken. At the end of the day, if Republicans fail to rescind and replace Obamacare, they are going to be hurting going forward.
Okay, here is some congressmen and also Kellyanne Conway on changing the bill.
We're going to go into this. We're going to try to make this bill better if we can. But right now, where it is, it's not what we told the voters we were going to do.
If you just look at the bill text, the very first paragraph says it amends the Affordable Care Act. It doesn't repeal it.
And everyone knows, as this American Health Care Act makes its way through the normal channels, it probably will be changed somewhat.
And then this is how Speaker Ryan talks about this fighting.
What you're seeing is we're going through the inevitable growing pains of being an opposition party to becoming a governing party. And in being an opposition party, we have divided government. 64% of our members have never known what it's like to work with a Republican president, to have unified government.
In other words, they got to make something happen.
Yep, because they promised this for 7 years, and they voted over and over again to repeal it. This is their #1 campaign promise. They have to do this to get on to anything else.
All right, but are there going to be enough people who say, well, we don't have to do this because I didn't agree to this?
In the end, they're going to say you cannot undercut a new president on his first big legislative
How much
initiative.
political capital will President Trump invest in this?
He certainly has committed to invest a lot. What happens over time? Does it all of a sudden become Ryan care when it looks like it's getting more and more unpopular? We don't know. But he says now he's in selling mode. He's going to go out there. He's going to put pressure on people, hold rallies. We'll see.
Breitbart's already calling it Ryan care.
Yeah.
President Trump is meeting with conservative leaders at this hour, including Senator Ted Cruz.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that strikes me is that we're not seeing this campaign now. I mean, it's great if there's a campaign to sell this to come, fine.
Might start
where is it?
I mean, needed it 2 weeks ago.
Why haven't they been building this case? I mean, I thought the president missed an opportunity in his joint session address to tell the story of Obamacare. I mean, there's a great story to be told about just how much damage Obamacare has done to raising premiums. I mean, all of the stories that you know, people like us who do this for a living know, but I don't think this story is well known. And Tom Price yesterday, when he was speaking to the White House press corps, took the podium and said, Obamacare is collapsing, you know the story. And I thought to myself, you know what, people really don't know the story. And part of the job that Republicans will have is telling the story. And Republicans always like to jump to budgets, and they like to jump to numbers, and they like to jump to facts. Part of what you have to do here is tell the story, and they haven't taken the time to tell the story. And I think now, after you're seeing Republicans beat each other up for several days, telling the story now becomes harder.
But part of the story is that these insurance companies are leaving this year.
Yeah, that's right. It is imploding. That's just a fact. And I think President Trump has said several times that he knows Obamacare is going to, you know, it's going to be its own demise pretty soon, but the responsible thing is to come forward. The only thing I would say to what Steve's saying is that we really have been telling the story for 7 years, and guess what? The American people bought it, and they think Obamacare is a failure. Now it's time, Paul Ryan's right, it's time to step up, right? But you have to do it in a way where people feel like they're included in that process, and the way this is rolled out today, they don't feel that way. They got to fix that problem fast.
Next up, President Trump dealing with North Korea and China, but breaking news about U.S. Marines on the ground in Syria.